should be played at high volume. This should be played at high volume. This should be played at high volume. Preferably in a residential area.
The following thoughts on Hoppe Hour do not represent Cox Media Group or its sponsoring. Anything you hear may and will be used against you. Thank you. Voted as best local podcast in Tampa Bay by the Creative Loafing. You're listening to Hoppe Hour.
What up? What is happening? This is Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and I'm very pumped about my next guest. We have Chicago radio legend Tommy Edwards live on Hoppe Hour. What's up, man?
Hi, how you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing good, man. My whole family is from Chicago, and they grew up listening to you and Larry Lujack. And then when I was like in fourth grade, I listened to you when you were on 1690. So it's a huge honor to have you on the show.
Wow, you were one of the 18 people listening to me on 1690. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I was actually able to pick up the reception, too. It was weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that station had a terrible signal. I mean, at night, for example, it was like 1,000 watts, which means, you know, you had like 10 100-watt bulbs on top of a stick. You know, I mean, it was terrible. But, you know, we did the best we could, and it lasted for a little while. But I have to tell you, we had so much fun doing that radio show.
How awesome was it during your whole legendary radio career working with Larry Lujack? What was that like?
Well, I met him first in 1972 when I arrived at WLS. I had come from WOR-FM New York City, and we were doing quite well in New York, and the ABC station there started pirating air talent, getting some of the other ABC stations around the country to hire talent, and I was one of them, and WLS hired me. So when I arrived at WLS in 72, in June of 72, one of the first people I met was Larry, and I had heard that he had already given notice that he was leaving in a week or two to go to WCFL. And I went and introduced myself to him, and he said, "You're the guy from New York, right?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "I don't shake hands with people from New York." And I went, "What?" Anyway, so that was my very first meeting with him. And by the way, he denied that ever happened. But I said, "Hey, Lair, come on. How could I make that up?" No, you did do that. We became very good friends even after he left WLS and went over to CFL, because a year after I got to the Big 89, I was the program director, and we decided we were going to go after Larry again and bring him back. And we just couldn't work it out with the amount of money that ABC gave us to pay him. So he stayed at CFL a little bit longer, and then basically we knocked that radio station out of its format. It was, I can't remember the exact year, but WCFL decided it was no longer going to play contemporary hit radio, and they started to play beautiful music. And Larry needed to get out of there, and the Chicago Federation of Labor that owned CFL needed to get him out of there because of his high salary. So they just negotiated with him and said, "You can leave," and they worked out a deal with WLS, and he came back over to WLS. And by that time, I was doing middays, and he was doing mornings, and I would go sit in the studio and talk to him and just kind of hang out and do some of my show prep in there. And that's how we really got to be close, and that was the origin of Animal Stories.
How did you come up with the prep for that segment?
Larry, back in those days, you had to have a certain amount of agricultural news on a 50,000-watt radio station in Chicago. That was part of your license. And so what Larry did back when he was there the first time was that he would, instead of reading stock prices and pig prices and, you know, wheat futures and stuff like that, he would find funny stories about animals. And he would say, "This is the WLS Agriculture Report. And did you know that pigs are smarter than horses?" You know, that kind of thing. So when I started sitting in the studio with him, we did a lot of live commercials back in those days. And one of the major clients we had was True Value Hardware Stores. And so Larry would be reading a live commercial about True Value Hardware Stores, And sometimes I just open up the mic and ask him a stupid question or make a comment about something he said, and we'd start laughing. And the boss came in and said, "Don't do that anymore. We don't want you to make these 60-second commercials more than 60 seconds. I mean, the way you're doing this is up to 2 minutes." So we went on the air and we said, our boss said we can't do this anymore. And True Value called up the boss and said, "If you don't let him do this, we're going to cancel." So the boss came back in and said, "Okay, well, you guys try to keep it under 2 minutes, that kind of thing, but go ahead and have fun with it." And then one day I walked into the studio and Larry said, "Look, I did this old agriculture report once. I'm going to do a thing called Animal Stories, and I'll be Uncle Lair, or charming and delightful Uncle Lair, and you be like a little kid." And I said, how about little snot-nosed Tommy? He went, yeah, let's do that. And that was just 45 seconds to a minute before we went on the air. So, I mean, that's how quickly we decided how we were going to do it, do what we did, and all that. And the original Animal Stories was, gather your young moppets around the radio, moms and dads. It's time for Uncle Lair's Animal Stories with his cute little friend, little snot-nosed Tommy. And then he would read some of these funny animal stories, and I'd say something stupid or laugh or whatever. And pretty soon we started getting letters. People would find interesting newspaper articles or real-life experiences that were really funny, and they would write them out. And that's how Animal Stories got to be so popular. And in the beginning, we had no idea that people were just going crazy for this feature. We started understanding more of that when businesses and places over in northwestern Indiana would call up and say, our workers are supposed to be at work at 10 o'clock. And the way you guys are doing this, they're still out in their cars listening. They're not coming in and punching in until well after 10 o'clock. We want you to get this program over with before 10. Well, we disregarded that completely, and we even announced that on the air. We said, we're not going to do that. So if you want to be out in the car listening to the Animal Stories, good for you, that kind of thing. So that's really one of our first indications that Animal Stories was really popular.
Now, how surreal was it, Tommy? Because this was just a bit you guys were doing just to do the agriculture report. Did you ever think it was going to explode like this? Like, how awesome was it for you guys?
It was one of these things where, again, the boss came in after like the first week of Animal Stories and said, this is going on too long. I want you to get this down to 90 seconds. I don't want it to be more than a minute and a half. And we said, what? And so we went on the air and we said that. We said, we were right in the middle of a story, and Larry did this intentionally. We had this funny story going, and he goes, oh my gosh, look what time it is. We've been doing this for 90 seconds, and our boss said we could not do this any longer than 90 seconds. So that's all the time we have for today, boys and girls. Tune in again, And all of a sudden, and people started calling and bitching and calling the boss names, and people were going crazy. And then he finally came in and said, okay, all right, okay, just go ahead and keep doing it. All right, don't worry about how much time. Just try not to make it too long. And we said, sure. So by that time, Larry and I got the indication that this was really popular and people were really digging it. And then people like Governor James Thompson called up, and he asked if he could come in and go on Animal Stories with us. And we said, well, yeah, Governor, come on, but, we might be making fun of you. And he went, that's fine. I want to be a part of it. So that was the kind of thing that we started hearing. We started hearing that Bill Murray's sister was recording Animal Stories because he had asked that she record them and send it to him. And then later, when I was working at an NBC station here in Chicago, I was programming it. I found this out later. I was talking to a general manager of a New York NBC station who said that he and David Letterman were good friends at Ball State, and they would go out in the car early in the morning so they could listen to Animal Stories over at Ball State University.
Now, going back to Larry and management, I sort of get the vibe that they didn't always get along. Am I right with that?
Oh, absolutely right. Larry was very, very genuine. Whatever he said off the air and on the air was the same thing. He wasn't putting on any kind of act. That was who he is. And when the boss said something, did something, or whatever that he didn't like, he was very outspoken. He said, "I don't like this. I'd rather not do it." But he was the consummate professional. If they said, "We want you to do it, Lair," so that's the end of the story. He said, "Okay, fine," and he did it. And as you know, when you're on the air, you have to keep a program log. And back in those days, you had to be much more very, very particular about a program log. It had to be done very precisely. Start times of commercials and checking them off that they ran and all this other stuff, and signing your name and attesting to the fact that what you ran on the air was indeed the truth and all this stuff. This was back when the FCC was a lot more powerful and regulatory with regard to program logs. Anyway, I had never seen a program log kept better than what Larry did. And I followed him on the air, so I would see this every day. And I would look at the log and I think, oh, my gosh, look what he did. This is unbelievable. Most guys in radio just check it off and don't worry about it. And, scratching some things that you could barely read and all this. And that Larry was totally different. There's so many stories about this guy that I could tell what a genuine person he was, what a very caring person he was. But also he was a very cold person to a lot of people and to a lot of ideas. And the relationship that he and I had was pretty much warm, but there were times when he would really piss me off. And there were times when I would tell him to his face that I didn't like what he was saying or didn't like what he was doing or whatever. But we were friends. And I think, and I really am sincere when I say this, that he was my best friend, because when he was suffering in the last year of his life, no one knew about this. I mean, his wife knew about it, and his daughter knew about it, but not his mother, and not to his father. And so I was sworn to secrecy, and so he and I would talk every week to 10 days, and he would share with me some of the things he was going through. And I would try to get him to laugh about something before we hung up. And that was pretty easy, because we would talk about something and he would start laughing, and I'd feel real good by getting off the phone with him laughing. So, but in the very, very end, I mean, the poor guy was really suffering.
Was that hard for you to watch, since he was so electric on air and he was like the life of the party? Was it hard for you to see him kind of go down like that?
Yeah, it was. It took me quite a while, even though I knew it was going to happen, because when he shared the information with me in the very first day of February, and he said that I probably won't be here for beyond a year, and then he died in December. So I knew what was going to happen, but when it did happen, it really hurt me badly. But before he actually passed away, he stopped taking phone calls, and I knew that the end was near at that point. But there were times when he and I would talk, and he would tell me about some of the effects that chemotherapy was doing to him and all that. And he needed somebody to vent to, and he didn't really want to talk to Judy, his wife. I mean, Jude's such a terrific person and everything, but he didn't want to hurt her, didn't want her to go through some of the real personal, disgusting things that a body does during all this thing. So he shared that information with me, and I was there to let him sound off and just get it off his chest.
Now, over the years, a lot of people in the media would refer to him as a jerk and a jackass. Did that ever offend you and bother you when people would say that about your best friend?
No, because he was. No, I mean, he was, if you were to call him up and you were to say, I want you to make an appearance, so-and-so, he'd say, I don't want to do that. He said, Larry, I want you to make an appearance and I want you to greet my friends. And he'd say, I don't want to do that. And they'd say, well, what's it going to take to get you there? And he says, look, number one, I don't want to do that, Ryan. I don't want to even be close to you. But if you want me to be there, $10,000. How badly do you want me there?
Oh, my God, really?
Yeah, and people would say, I'll pay that. And he would say, okay, I'll come. And he would go, and he would be Larry Lujack. I mean, he would go and say, hey, and he'd say, are you really Larry Lujack? Yeah. And I listen to you every day. And he'd say, oh, geez, can't you find something better to do in the morning or something like that? I mean, that kind of thing. That was his persona, but that's what he was funny at, too, because, like on the clunk letter of the day, when people would send letters saying how much they enjoyed listening to him or how much they enjoyed listening to animal stories or stuff like that, he'd go, oh, my God, blah, blah, blah. Then you could hear him wad up the letter and throw it in the trash can. He'd say, oh, God, I can't stand these syrupy letters and that kind of stuff. But that was funny. And that's just the way he was. That was part of his persona.
Now, did you guys ever get into any arguments on air, or is there like a moment when things just weren't the best?
Yeah. There was a time when we were WLS, and we had a new program director come in, and this program director was making some changes to the way we did remotes at Great America. And a bunch of us were kind of sitting there looking at him going, what? Why are you doing this? I mean, we go out there and we do our shows from the hometown square area of Great America. Why are you changing it? And he'd say, because I want to. And we'd say, but who are you? I mean, you're just new to this city. You're just new to this radio station. You don't know anything about Great America. You don't even know much about us. And so at one point, I just said, the heck with it. And I stood up in the meeting. There was a jock meeting. And I stood up in the meeting, and I just told this guy, I said, oh, go to hell. And I turned around and walked out the door. Then Larry came to – I was back in an engineering part of the radio station. And Larry just walked in the door and said, hey, listen. I said, I don't want to hear it. Don't talk to me. I don't want to hear it. And he'd say, okay. And he'd back off. I had no idea what he was going to tell me, but I just thought he was going to come to me and start criticizing what I had said or whatever. So, yeah, that was the kind of thing. That was probably the most extreme disagreement that he and I had. But we rarely disagreed on much.
Now, since you guys were pretty outspoken on air and did a pretty fun show, I can imagine that over the years you guys had some crazy fans. Did that ever happen to you guys?
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh, yes. We had, on Animal Stories, for example, guys would take pictures of their wives topless and send it to us. And we'd go, what the heck? Can you believe the husband took this picture? And oh, my God, that kind of thing. We had those kinds of things. We would have people coming up to the radio station and doing everything they can to try to distract us while we were on the air, because the studio had a viewing window, and you could stand outside in the hallway there at the old stone container building at 360 North Michigan Avenue. You could stand out there and watch us do the show and watch us to do Animal Stories. But but a lot of these people tried to distract us while we were out there, probably just to get us to talk about them. Try to get hey, look out here, look at this guy, look at that girl, whatever. And so they were always trying to do stuff like that.
Did you like the whole local celebrity thing? Because I worked for a show in Cleveland called Rover, and now I work at 102.5 The Bone here in Tampa, and I'm a pretty noticeable guy. I'm 6'9", I have a limp, and I'm on air, so people know who I am sort of down here. Like, I'm in promotions, but I'm on air occasionally. And it's very flattering when people come up to you and say they like listening to you, because it motivates me. And on the grand scale of things, you guys were the king of the third biggest city in this country. Did you ever get sick of being a local celebrity, or did you appreciate every second of it?
We did. We appreciated every second of it. And to give you an example of what the celebrity was a negative was, and Larry would do this more often than myself, but when Larry really liked to have privacy. I mean, he was a very private person when he was off the air and when he was home. And other than the fact that he'd call me all the time when he was home, but that's not what I'm talking about. When he'd order a pizza or when he would order carry-out food or something like that, he used a pseudonym. He would call up and he'd say, this is Wilford Johnson, and I would like to order a pizza, something like that. He would not use his real name. Because when he would walk in and if he said pizza for Larry Lujack, everybody would start reacting and people would say, oh, my God, look at him. Oh, he didn't like that. I mean, there were times when he just wanted to be left alone. So he would use a pseudonym for a number of things like that. When he came into town, when they inducted him into the Museum Television and Radio Hall of Fame, he and I were out in the city that day, and I was going to introduce him that night. And so he and I were spending the day out running some errands because he had to pick up a tuxedo and he had to go shop for a couple of different things. And it was amazing. He had been off the air for a number of years. He'd been living at the house that he built in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he walks into a store and everybody recognizes him. And, he's like, oh, my God, just wow. And he said, I wish we could get this thing done without having to go through all this. So there were times when he really cherished his privacy and got uncomfortable with the celebrity status.
Now, how would he do? Like, let's say you guys went to a fancy dinner and media figures at that time were at events. Was he a guy who would mingle with the local news anchor, let's say Harry Volkman or somebody else in radio, or was he to himself?
He was always to himself. When he was inducted that night into the Museum Television and Radio Hall of Fame, there were a number of celebrity radio and TV people in attendance because he along with some other people were inducted that night. It wasn't just Larry. But he met a couple of iconic figures from WGN Radio, some of the guys who had been there for 25, 35 years that he had never met. And he enjoyed talking to them and sharing some experiences with them. But it was not something that he was out searching for people to talk to. It was usually people just gravitating right to him and introducing themselves. And he would like to, he would talk to people and all that stuff. But he was, like I said, he was a private person, a very private person, and it took a while for him to warm up to you.
Would you say you're the opposite, where you're more of a social guy that likes to talk to people?
Yeah, that's probably one of the things that was the key to the success of the two of us that we had. Because even when I put together that whole 1690 experience, he was living in Santa Fe, and I called him up and I said, look, I'm going to be running the station. I'm actually going to be building it from scratch, and I'm thinking about you and I doing the morning show. What do you think about that? He said, yeah, sure, I guess so. What do you want to do? And so we started talking about some of the formatics that we wanted to accomplish and some of the features that we wanted on the air. But he would say he would say, do you think you can pull this off? And I said, yeah, I'm going to go up and I'm going to talk to the managers. I'm going to go talk to all the different promotion people and the sales people, and I'll take care of all that. Don't worry. You just be who you are. So we sent over an engineer, and we hooked up a remote facility in his house. And the fact that when I would get to the radio station in the morning super early, I would go into master control and hook us up so that he was getting a feed and I was being able to listen to him. And it sounded like he was sitting right next to me the whole time. But he was actually in his house down in Santa Fe, and I was in the studio in Illinois Center.
Was it hard doing a show where he's in another part of America? Because I know shows like Howard, they did that when Robin Quivers had cancer, and they made it seem like she was right there. So how did you make it work where he's in Arizona and you're in Chicago? Was it hard at first?
No, it wasn't difficult at all. It's the fact that he and I were in the same studio for so many years at WLS, and the fact that he and I kept in contact for all the time that we both were gone from WLS. Because I had gone to other stations in Chicago. I was programming a station here, doing a morning show there, joining CBS and being sent to Boston for 2.5 years and then to Los Angeles for 11. But all during that time, Larry and I talked on the phone quite frequently. And once we put together 1690, it was just so comfortable for me because it sounded like he was sitting right next to me. And that's the way it came out on the air. And that's one of the things that people that listen to us were just amazed at, because they were convinced that he was in Chicago when he wasn't. But it was a piece of cake, really. It was a piece of cake.
What went wrong with Real Oldies? Was it because of the frequency? What went wrong with that?
Well, it was a AM signal on the expanded AM dial at the time when a lot of radios and in cars didn't go up to 1690.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one problem right there. The FCC expanded the AM spectrum, and it took quite a while for radios to catch up and actually offer that to people. So that was problem number one. Problem number two was that it was a daytimer with, 10,000 watts and 1,000 at night, way up there at 1690. So if you tuned into 1690 at night, you heard another radio station somewhere else in the country because the 1690 signal in Chicago was so weak. So there were so many different reasons why that was doomed from the very beginning. When I agreed to come into Chicago to build that station, I was told that the engineering specs showed that station penetrated the entire market quite well, and that everyone throughout the Chicago metropolitan area could hear it in the daytime, and half of the city could listen to it at night. That didn't come out. It did not come out that way. And that was unfortunate, and I felt real bad about that. I felt bad that I had convinced Larry to do this and hired other people to be on that radio station and a staff. I mean, Ron Smith was my music director, and he did a spectacular job, and Lynn O'Kelly was the production guy, and he did all of our production. And, I mean, these guys worked so hard to build that station and keep it going. And unfortunately, it was just not going to happen. Then there was a major change at senior management of the company that owned us. And the new manager that came in decided that he wanted to sell the company or sell the station to another firm. And that's what he did. He sold the station from under us.
Now, how upset were you when you have these high hopes that the frequency is going to be great, and then it ends up not being like that? Did you learn to fight adversity, or was there a point, Tommy, where you were just getting really mad about it?
I was getting more and more disappointed about it because I even had an opportunity to talk to one of the senior managers of the company, not just of the station, but of the company. And I had said, if we invested and transferred this signal to another one of the signals that we own, that you own in Chicago, I think that we could perform better in the ratings than what this other station is doing now. And I think they considered it briefly, but then they decided against it. So, it's business. And that's the way I took it when I got the phone call saying it's basically folded, because it's just business. It's not personal. And we learned a lot from it. We had a lot of fun doing it. We were able to entertain a lot of people, even with a small signal like that. But we had a good listenership for a station that didn't have much of a signal.
Now, you've done so much in your life. You've done radio. You're the PA announcer for the Bulls. How awesome is that?
Well, that started in '76. I love basketball.
Me too.
Enjoyed the game. And a manager at the radio station, WLS, called me in and said, you enjoy basketball? And I said, I love it. And they said, well, the Bulls are looking for a PA announcer. And at that time, their offices were right across the street on Michigan Avenue. He said, why don't you go over and talk to them? They called me, and I told them I'd talk to you. And so I went over and talked to the guy, and he offered me a job back then. That was in '76, '77. And that was the year that Artis Gilmore's first year, Scott May was the first-round draft pick, and we went to the playoffs, played the Portland Trail Blazers. They eventually eliminated the Bulls in the first round and then went on to win the NBA championship that year. So we played the NBA championship in the playoffs, and so that was pretty spectacular. And, great players like Jerry Sloan, Norm Van Leer, Bob Love, all those guys were playing back in those days. And so I did that for about 14 years, and when I left for Boston, when I joined CBS and went to Boston, I resigned, and they gave me a terrific going away, and then I was transferred out to L.A. and then came back to Chicago, and the Bulls called up and asked me to come back, and I did. This is after they had won their championship, so I missed the 6 championships that they had. But the Bulls always kept in contact with me wherever I was. Some of the managers, the senior people of the Bulls organization would contact me and just ask me how I'm doing and what's going on and when are you coming back to Chicago and that kind of thing. So when I came back, I started doing the PA again, and right now I'm in my 25th season of total number of seasons that I've worked for them. I love it. It's great. It's being able to sit at center court and getting to know a number of the players and all the people working at the table, who are the official scoring people, the timers, the 24-second clock operators, the assistant scoring people, all those. And they're all friends of mine. And we have even the bad seasons, we have a good time doing what we're doing.
How disappointed are you in the Bulls this year? I live in Tampa. I'm originally from Chicago. I moved out of there about 9 months ago, so I haven't been able to watch this current season. And I had no idea that their record was just 500. So what's going on with the team, Tommy?
Injuries can kill you, and that's exactly what happened. With Joakim going down with a shoulder that took him out for the rest of the season, we didn't have the starting small forward at the beginning of the season. Mike Dunleavy had surgery just before the season on his back, and it took basically half the season for him to heal. Then we had Niko Miricic go down, and he had appendicitis, and then he had complications after that surgery that kept him out longer. Jimmy Butler, who is really the best player on the team right now, and the leading scorer, injured his knee, so he was out for a number of weeks. And the Bulls just tried, but they couldn't make it. I mean, other teams were coming in and beating them up and everything, and it was unfortunate. Excuse me. Last night, Jimmy came back and Nico was back, and the Bulls beat the Houston Rockets, which is a good team, but they have some excellent players. They have a great offense. The Rockets probably have a weaker defense than their offense. Their offense is terrific. But the Bulls were able to play some pretty good D on them, and they beat them 108-100. And so maybe there's some hope for the Bulls in the playoffs. They've got to get to the playoffs, and with Jimmy back and Nico back, and if the team can gel around these guys, then things are going to start looking better for the end of the season. But it's been up and down and up and down.
What did you think of the move as they got rid of Tom Thibodeau last year?
It was not surprising to me because I had heard from people who know some of the owners of the team, and there were just words that there was some uneasiness. There was some hard feelings between Tibbs and his superiors. And so when it all came down, it really didn't surprise a lot of people. And we wish him the best of luck. He's a heck of a coach. And right now he is consulting like the Golden State Warriors. I mean, he's providing some consulting services for them. And that's where his strength is. And he, of course, was an assistant to Krzyzewski and the Olympic teams. And I think he's just an excellent basketball coach. His strength, his forte is defense. And I think that he's going to do quite well. He'll be a head coach for another NBA team soon, very soon, I would think.
Now, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but did you ever get to meet him and ever get to have a conversation with him?
No.
Really?
He's not a people person.
I can see that. That's what I've heard. I've heard that at media press conferences, his answers were very vague and he wasn't the most friendliest of guys.
No, there were times when I would walk. He and I'd be in the hallway together, down by the dressing rooms, the locker rooms, and I would say, "Hi, Coach," and sometimes I don't even think he even responded.
That's kind of weird. I don't know. It's like, I know you're not a people person, but can't you say hi? I don't like people with egos, man.
Yeah, I don't know where his mind was. I don't know what he was thinking. He doesn't like to make eye contact. See, that was the key right there. He doesn't make eye contact. A number of the players do. I mean, when the players, I'm passing some of the players after the game's over, and they're back in civilian clothes type things, and they come out of the locker room, and we look at each other and, hey, how's it going? Good game, that kind of thing. But Thibodeau didn't make eye contact with people.
What do you think about Derrick Rose? Because he obviously tore his ACL in 2012, and he hasn't been the same since then. What does the future hold for him?
That will be fascinating to find out, and it's coming up after next year?
Yes.
He's going to be an unrestricted free agent after next season. And he is talking, I've seen reports where he's talking about that he might want to leave Chicago and go someplace else. Is that true? I don't know. How do the Bulls feel about that? I don't know. I mean, that kind of thing never filters down to my level. So it will be interesting to see what happens. Do the Bulls re-sign him? Does he go someplace else? Who knows?
He's not as young anymore. He's going on 28 years old.
Yeah, he's had the roughest amount of time. I mean, like you mentioned, the ACL, then he has the torn meniscus, and he's had more and more injuries. And even last night, he took a charge and went down, and his back was sore, pretty sore. And when he came in back in the fourth quarter after Jimmy fouled out, you could tell he wasn't feeling terrific. So, I don't know. Is he injury prone? Maybe. I don't know. But back when he came in the league, he was spectacular. I mean, he would explode to the basket. And this is what I think we miss the most. When he's bringing the ball up the floor, back in the early days in his first couple of years, he would explode to the basket, and no one could catch him. And now it's totally different. He's slowed down.
And now, before I let you go, you retired from 104.3 K Hits about 2 years ago now. How has everything been with your retirement?
Oh, I love it. I highly recommend it. Yeah, I had done 54 years on radio. I started in high school. I was in the Navy and stationed in the Pentagon and had a big-time security clearance there. And during the daytime, and I was at a radio station at night. And then a New York station called up and offered me a weekend gig that was paying more money than 6 days on the week in D.C. So while I was still in the Navy, I was flying up there in a uniform on Friday afternoon and doing a couple of shows and then flying back on Sunday night and going back to work in the Pentagon on Mondays. And they told me that as soon as you get out of the service, you're going to go full time. And that's exactly what happened. I got out of the service on October 31st and went on the air full time on November 3rd, and did that for 2.5 years, and that's when WLS started calling me. So it's been a constant radio thing ever since I was a sophomore in high school, and I finally just hit the wall. I just hit the wall. I told my wife that at one point or another, about 6-7 months before I retired, I just said, I just don't know how much longer I want to do this. And she said, when you decide that you want to walk away, tell me, and that's what we'll do. You'll know when you're ready to just walk away from it. And then that's what happened late 2014. That's when I went to her and I said, I'm ready. I'm done. And she said, okay. So when I went and told Todd Kavanaugh, the program director of K-Hits, he talked me out of doing it right away. He says, I can't do this now. Let's wait a month, and maybe we'll do it then. And he told me later that he was trying to get me to a position where I'd change my mind, But I didn't change my mind. I knew what I wanted. So I was able to walk away from it on my terms, and I haven't regretted it at all.
What are some things you like to do in your free time since you're not in radio anymore?
I read a lot. I write a lot. I have written a number of memories and just things that I want to put down for my family just so that they can understand some of the things that I've experienced and things that I've really enjoyed and all that. I am in a house right now where I take care of it. It's bigger than I need, but therefore when it's too big, there's too many things to do, and I'm always doing something outside or inside or whatever. But I don't care. I mean, it's fun. I also go to lunch a lot with my friends. I call them and say, let's get together and catch up. And so we do that, and I travel. I got family out in California, and I go see them a lot. It's one of these things that not having too many responsibilities. When the Bulls go on the road, so do I. When they go on a 2-week trip to the south or to the west or the east on these long road trips, I jump on a plane and go to California.
Well, Tommy, I appreciate everything you've done in radio. My whole family is from Chicago, and they all have memories of their parents driving them to school, listening to WLS. And I have memories listening to real oldies in Chicago. So it's been an absolute honor and a real fun time having you on Hoppe Hour.
I appreciate it. This has been a terrific interview. You do a great job, by the way.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
All right, bye. And that was the one and only Lil Tommy Edwards, a.k.a. Tommy Edwards, a radio legend in this business. They changed Top 40 radio forever, him and Larry Lujack. And I have memories. I had a little CD player that was crappy back in like 2004. When I would take the bus to school, I would listen to Real Oldies 1690. So it's kind of cool for me that I sort of grew up listening to Larry Lujack. And I listened to a lot of other shows as well. But it feels good to say that I was able to listen to Larry Lujack and Tommy Edwards. If you're a fan of Tommy Edwards and you just heard this interview, and you want to hear more of Hoppe Hour, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. If you have a smartphone, if you have the Google Play or iPhone feature, search up HOPPE Radio. That's HOPPE Radio, Hoppe Radio, and you can hear all 100 of my interviews I've done. Also, go to my website, RyanHoppeRadio.com, RyanHoppeRadio@gmail.com, and tweet at me, @RyanHoppeRadio. Once again, shout out to Tommy Edwards for coming on. It was an absolute honor, and I had a lot of fun doing the show, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. This has been Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, saying peace out.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour.